So inspired was the Muslim Ummah from the construction of Mimar Sinan, that the Arabs in Mecca had invited him to build the first, pay attention brothers and sisters, after Ibrahim and Ismail alayhim salam, after both of these tremendous men in history, the first man to erect a building around the Kaaba was Mimar Sinan. They invited this Turkish brother, this architect, because they had seen what he was building literally at the doorsteps of Europe, at the gates of the New World. They said to him, please come and build something in Mecca. Look at this construction. Minarets that almost touch the sky. 3 balconies. The biggest domes in the world. And for those of you who saw the earthquakes around Turkey, the mosques don't come down. The Japanese are studying the minarets and the construction of Mimar Sinan till this very day. What did he do that was so spectacular to literally keep a pencil balanced on earth and not fall down with an earthquake? Because that's what the minaret was. It's as thin as a pencil, and the Europeans call them pencils. So they invited Mimar Sinan to come to Saudi Arabia, come to the Holy Land, come to the Haram, and build the first building around the Kaaba. So Mimar Sinan came and he looked at the Kaaba and he looked around and he said, okay, I know what I'm going to build. He made some drawings, some basic drawings, and he started building around the Kaaba. And for those of you who haven't seen it, go home or Google it. Google Kaaba. Go to the images and take a look. Around the Kaaba are very small domes. Very small domes. And there's hundreds of them. With arched columns in the shape of an arch. And on top of them are just many domes. And it forms something of a shape of a pentagon. It kind of looks like a pentagon, right? And it's around the Kaaba. And then later you had the sultans, etc., extend on that. But that was the first one. When the Arabs had looked at basically all Mimar Sinan built was essentially what looked like a bunch of candles around the Kaaba, they were devastated. They were shocked and disappointed. Subhanallah. In your country, you build Masjid Sulaiman that has a cemetery, the biggest dome, 4 minarets, 3 balconies on every minaret, a massive garden, attached to it, God knows what, a school, a bathroom, a hammam, a place for wudu, and all the rest of it. And you come to the holiest of holies, and you erect essentially what is 150 candles. You can imagine their disappointment. They had asked the greatest architect in Islamic history to come and contribute. And this is what he comes up with. And Mimar Sinan, he looked at them and he said to them, brothers, over there is war. So we must have that attitude. Over here is ibadah. And we need to drop our pride. And who am I anyway? Who am I anyway to challenge the construction of Ibrahim and Ismail and come up with something prettier than the Kaaba? Never. Never. And to this very day, wallahi, until this very day, we look at the big clock in the Kaaba, in Mecca. We look at the massive construction, the granite and all the rest of it, that all the money spent. And everybody looks at it in awe. Wow, subhanallah. Look at the clock that Malik Fahad built and all the rest of it. It's our hand is 30 meters long, and its second hand its minute hand is 20 meters long, and its second hand is 15 meters long, and it's the biggest clock in the world and all the rest of it. And nobody realizes that Mimar Sinan built these little domes around the Kaaba, because he didn't want you to realize it. He didn't want you to see it. He wanted you to pay attention to the Kaaba. Rahmatullah alayh. One day he was inside a masjid he had built. And one man was walking around the masjid and he found Mimar Sinan inside having argili, you know, the hubbly bubbly, where you find that Titanic. He had one of those inside the masjid. And he got the shock of his life. How could he be having an argili, a shisha, in the masjid? Astaghfirullah. So he managed to advise the mukhtar of the town, the man responsible for the town, and so on and so forth, until it actually reached the Sultan himself. And the Sultan on his horse, with his sword, said, Wallahi, if I find him having argili inside the mat, I'll take his head off myself. Architect or no architect, unacceptable. So they got there, and lo and behold, who was inside having a shisha? An 80-year-old architect. Assalamu alaikum. Alaikum assalam. They said to him, what are you doing having a shisha, an argili, or like the Turks say, nargila, in the masjid? And he said to them, do you see a fire, a coal on the argili, on the shisha? They said no. He said, do you see tobacco on the shisha? They said no. He said, so do you think I'm here actually smoking in the masjid because I want to smoke? They said, then why? He said, because my voice, I'm too old, I'm 80 years old. My voice doesn't travel. I need to know I've built something where if the khatib of the masjid or someone giving a talk in the masjid, that his sound, his voice, the sound waves would travel and cover every place in the masjid. So he would go brrr and then listen for the echoes to ensure that every cavity in the wall would cause a reverberation of sound in another direction for the benefit of those that were sitting there so they can listen, because in that time they never had amplifiers and speakers. Look at what this man built. And we look at the mosques and we go, subhanAllah, look at the engravings in the wall, they're so beautiful. The engravings in the wall are not for beauty. It's actually for function. It's not for fashion, it's for function. And why is it that the carvings in the wall are only in the corner of the wall? Not on the flat surface of the wall, in the corners. Because that's where the sound waves have problems and they actually collide and the sound dies in the corner. But if you had cavities in that corner, you cause the sound waves to vibrate and to bounce off in various directions so everybody can listen. It's like getting a prism and putting it in light. And it goes everywhere. This was a man that was building mosques almost 1,000 years ago. And Europe, especially in Poland, there's a day in Poland, I don't know if you know this, where they throw water on themselves from a river. It's a national day. They get some water in the river and they throw it on each other. And it actually came from their traditions that they would wash once a year. And at that time they were washing once a year in the river. And Mimar Sinan was looking at the reverberation of sound waves in the corner of the masjid. Allahu Akbar. Look at where this man was. And pay attention, brothers and sisters. When a candle burns, above the candle it lets off, if you pay attention to the carbon that actually burns off, it's black. And if you turn off a candle with your fingers, you'll see the blackness on your fingers. The mosques that they built at that time had over 1,000 candles. And why is it the ceilings weren't black? The ceilings weren't black. Because what Mimar Sinan had done at the time was he realized this. So what he did was he actually built a crevice, an opening in the ceiling that would attract the air into another room that had a small ceiling, and the blackness would go straight onto that ceiling and would sit there. And the Sultan came to him one day and he said to him, Imam Sina, why are you building a spare room that no one's using? He said, just trust me. Just trust me. After he had finished building the mosque, and after some time, they've been praying in there for days and days and days and days. Imam Sina went into that room, and with what is essentially a chisel, he carved off the blackness from the ceiling, and he put it in, wrapped it in wood, and he built the first pencil, and he gave it to the Sultan, and he said to him, Sultan, from now on you sign your name with this pencil, with this lead. And the Sultan said, why? He said, because have you ever gotten charcoal and actually tried to write on a piece of paper and then rub it off? You can't. It just smudges. You can't rub it off. So essentially no one can fake, rub off or destroy that signature. Once it's been signed, it's been signed. It's like a stamp, a seal. He said to him, when the Sultan signs, it should never be rubbed off. And what better way for you to sign than to use the charcoal from the candles that were burning from the nights of tahajjud in the mosque for the Muslims. That is what our Khalif signs with. The very carbon, the very pencil that you sign your name on behalf of the Ummah comes from the candles that lit the mosque while they were praying for hours to their Lord. This is the story of Mimar Sinan, one of the greatest architects the Muslim world had ever seen. He wasn't building mosques, he was building confidence. He was building character. He was focused on the future. Until this very day, when we go there, when we go to Istanbul, and we see the minarets everywhere. Know this, brothers and sisters, most of those constructions came from him, or at least in the minimum, inspired by him.